My apologies, I kind of cut you off there. Just trying to move this so you can see that's better. So I've got my presser foot inside of the hole, inside of my top zipper, and I'm just going to kind of manoeuvre my panels underneath so that my foot will go down just where that tab is, and I can then top stitch through the top zipper hole. So you can see I've got a hole there where the zipper is, and I'm stitching within the hole. This is the easiest way to be able to top stitch both sides of the zipper. You could, I suppose, if you really were worried about doing this, leave that that piece untop stitched, but I just think for a professional finish it's worth it. Pull it out from underneath your needle, and if you want to, you can turn, what I like to try and do is just kind of turn the whole thing through the right way, so that when I know the sides aren't done, but this gives me a kind of a clear view of how things will look once they're, so you can kind of see my zippers will be orientated in the same way. This is how my fabric's going to look. It's going to look just wicked. Loving it already. Okay, so let's turn it out that way again. So we've got the wrong side on the outside, and I'm going to pull all these lining panels out now because we're going to stitch around the outside. So I'm going to start by matching up at the corners at the bottom edge where the folds are on those lining panels, and I'm going to match up those bottom corners of those lining panels. Grab some clips. Now it's really important that you clip these properly, because if you don't, then the whole thing will go slightly wonky. So I'm clipping this side as well. Don't worry about that bottom edge. I will just clip it, but we're not going to stitch along there just at the moment. When you get to the side here where this little zipper tab is, what we're going to do is we're going to push that zipper tab towards the exterior fabric, and we're going to kind of press it down. Use our fingers. There's not a lot of fabric here. Use our fingers, and we're going to open up the seam allowance on both sides of that join. And clip, making sure that that seam allowance is clipped directly together. So I've opened the seam allowance, and I'm just literally going to clip right on top of it. I'll pop a clip there. The same at this end. I'm going to push the zipper tab towards the exterior fabric. I'm opening up the seam allowance on both sides with my fingers. And clip. Come down, and I'm going to clip the two bottom corners of that second lining pair, the ones that haven't got the fold on the bottom. They should all match up perfectly. And then I'm going to come back down the other side, and again, zipper pull. You might need to move your zipper pull slightly away from the edge. You must, however, make sure that both of your zippers are at least half open. So let's just make sure that they're open. Oh, I nearly forgot that. Wouldn't that look good? We all do that though, don't we? All forget to open our zippers, even though it says in great big letters. I mean, I wrote the blooming pattern, you think I'd know. So opening up those seam allowances on either side again. Let's get another clip. Again, at this join, pushing the zipper tab towards the exterior fabric. Opening up the seam allowance, both top and bottom, and matching them. And clipping them in place. Right, so we now have our panels completely clipped in place. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at this bottom corner, the corner where we've got those folded hems, and we're going to stitch all the way down, around and back up the other side. And we're going to use an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now what I like to do is use an awl. Those little bits at the ends of the zipper, there's not a lot of gap there. So as soon as you take the clip off, if you use an awl, you can kind of hold the 2 panels of fabric together without fear that you're going to stitch your fingers into the seams, which is not ideal. We come down here, so I'm just going to take that clip out. Then we come along the bottom, and this is the pocket that hasn't got the folds. This is the pocket lining that doesn't have the folds, so you can stitch right the way along the bottom to secure that. I need to go a little bit more because I'm not quite at 1/4 inch. You must make sure that your seam allowances are accurate at this point, because if they're not, then you're going to find you've got wobbly stitching when it comes to where the zipper tabs are. The zipper tabs are close to the edge, and they're done like that so that we don't have a gap, because there's nothing that's more unattractive than a zipper tab with a flaming grey opening the other side of it. In my opinion. It's just holding those seam allowances open as I go up over them. I just find an awl is really useful for that. It gives me like an extra digit that I can get in the way of everything, but without fear that I'm going to actually stitch over my finger. Okay, so we've now gone all the way down and all the way around, except for this folded hem one. So I'm just going to trim the corners, the bottom corners at 45 degrees, just to take out any bulk out of those corners. And then I'm going to pop my hand in, and if you've opened your zippers, which you should have done, you should be able to turn this whole thing through the right way. There we go. So now we have a sort of a long sausage with our 2 linings at either end. What we're going to do is we're going to push that end pocket lining back into inside of the zipper. We're going to use either a pokey tool, if you've got one, of something that you like to use, to push out the zipper tabs. I've got a thread there that's going to annoy me. So if you've got a particular thing, I like to use one of these. I'm just going to push that out on both ends. Got another thread there. So that's sitting beautifully. I'm happy with that one. Now this one that's got the folded ends on, before we stick it back in, let's just open that zip a little bit more because we don't seem to have it quite open enough. I'm just going to fold that so that the seams are on the side, and I'm going to fold it so that my edges are together. Now if you feel that you want to trim off a little bit of that bulk from the inside of that seam, that's absolutely fine. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, to be honest. Sometimes I just forget. But it does make for a tidier pocket lining if you don't have too bulkier corners. So let's match up the two folded edges and clip them in place. And you can either close this by hand stitching with a nice whip stitch, or as I'm going to do on my machine, because this is the inside of a pocket and I don't honestly think anybody's going to really notice. And I'm going to be even lazier because I'm not actually changing my thread so that it matches. I'm still using the same grey that I'm using for the outside. And I'm stitching along the bottom here using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, which seals that turning hole. There we go, it's all sealed. And then I'm going to pop my lining back inside, poking out the bottom corners, and then I'm going to use my finger or my pokey tool or whatever it is I choose to do to push out the tabs at the top so that they sit nicely. It's looking super. Take your iron and press this. On both sides. What you want to make sure is that those side seams are sitting nicely as they should, not rolled over from one side to the other. So make sure that you've got them nice and square so that the side seam is actually on the side and not sort of sitting on one side of this panel. There we go. Quite happy with that. And you can fold it in half and you can kind of see how that's going to look inside of your purse. Doesn't that look fabulous? It's perfect. Right, so I will come back to you and show you how to do, how to construct the frame pocket. So it's very similar at one end, but we then have a shaped panel at the other end for our frame. So I'll come back to you and show you how to do that.